There are places in every town that seem to hold a little more magic than the rest. Sometimes it's a quiet park where the wind always seems to sing, or a library where the dust motes dance in the sunlight. But on Crescent Lane, tucked between a sleepy bookshop and a garden full of moonflowers, there is a bakery that only opens when the world is fast asleep. The Midnight Bakery is a place of gentle wonders. Its windows glow with golden light long after the last street lamp has flickered out, and the air is always filled with the scent of warm bread, sweet pastries, and a hint of something mysterious, like cinnamon and starlight. No one is quite sure who runs the bakery or how it always seems to know just what you need. But those who find their way there never forget the comfort it brings. This is the story of a girl named Elsie, who discovers the Midnight Bakery one restless night, and of the magical friends, secret recipes, and sleepy adventures that await her behind its welcoming doors. Elsie lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as the clock on her nightstand ticked softly. The moon was high and round, casting silver patterns on her bedroom wall. She had tried counting sheep, reading her favorite book, and even listening to the gentle hum of the night outside, but sleep would not come. She slipped out of bed and tiptoed to the window, peering out at the quiet street below. Crescent Lane was peaceful at night, with its rows of tidy houses and the old bookshop at the corner. But tonight, something was different. A warm, golden light glowed from a shop she had never noticed before, nestled between the bookshop and a garden overflowing with moonflowers. Curiosity tugged at her heart. She pulled on her slippers and wrapped herself in her softest blanket, then crept quietly down the stairs and out the front door. The night air was cool and gentle, carrying the scent of dew and distant flowers. Elsie followed the golden light, her footsteps silent on the cobblestones. As she drew closer, she saw that the shop's sign read, "The Midnight Bakery," in curling silver letters. The windows were fogged with warmth, and the most delicious smells drifted out. Fresh bread, sweet cakes, and something else she couldn't quite name. Elsie hesitated at the door, her heart fluttering with excitement and a little nervousness. She reached out and pushed gently. The bell above the door chimed, not with a sharp ring, but with a soft, musical note that seemed to welcome her in. Inside, the bakery was a world of its own. The walls were lined with shelves of bread and pastries, each one more tempting than the last. A long counter stretched across the room, behind which stood a tall, gentle-looking woman with flour-dusted hair and a smile as warm as the oven. "Welcome, dear," the woman said, her voice soft as a lullaby. "I'm Mrs. Maple, and you must be Elsie. We've been expecting you." Elsie blinked in surprise. "You know my name?" Mrs. Maple nodded, her eyes twinkling. "The Midnight Bakery always knows when someone needs a little extra comfort. Why don't you come in and have a seat?" Elsie settled onto a cozy stool by the counter, wrapping her blanket tighter around her shoulders. Mrs. Maple poured her a cup of warm milk and set a plate of honeyed buns in front of her. The first bite was soft and sweet, melting on her tongue and filling her with a gentle warmth. As Elsie ate, she looked around the bakery. There were jars of jam in every color, baskets of rolls and croissants, and a chalkboard covered in swirling handwriting that listed the night's special treats: moonbeam muffins, dreamer's scones, and starlight shortbread. A sleepy black cat curled up by the oven, purring softly. Elsie reached down to scratch its ears, and it blinked at her with golden eyes. Mrs. Maple bustled about, humming a quiet tune as she kneaded dough and sprinkled sugar over a tray of pastries. "Would you like to help me with the next batch?" she asked. Elsie nodded eagerly, and Mrs. Maple handed her a tiny apron and a wooden spoon. Together they mixed flour and sugar, cracked eggs, and folded in handfuls of blueberries that sparkled like tiny sapphires. As they worked, Mrs. Maple told Elsie stories about the midnight bakery. "We open only when the moon is high and the world is quiet," she explained. "People come here when they need a little magic, or a bit of comfort, or just a place to rest." Elsie listened, her heart filling with wonder. She felt safe and welcome, as if she had found a secret place made just for her. When the muffins were ready, Mrs. Maple opened the oven and a wave of sweet, warm air filled the room. She handed Elsie the first muffin, still steaming and golden. "For sweet dreams," she said with a smile. Elsie took a bite, and the taste was like a hug, soft, comforting, and just a little bit magical. She felt her eyelids grow heavy, and Mrs. Maple led her to a cozy nook by the window, where a soft blanket and a pillow waited. As Elsie curled up, the black cat jumped onto her lap, purring a lullaby. Mrs. Maple dimmed the lights, and the bakery grew quiet, filled with the gentle sounds of the night. Elsie drifted into sleep, her dreams full of moonlight, warm bread, and the promise of more adventures to come. Elsie awoke to the soft clinking of teacups and the gentle rustle of parchment. For a moment, she wondered if it had all been a dream. The golden light, the warm bread, the magical bakery. But as she opened her eyes, she found herself still nestled in the cozy nook by the window, the black cat curled up at her feet. The bakery was quieter now, bathed in the silvery glow of the moon. Mrs. Maple was at the counter, carefully measuring flour into a large bowl. The air was filled with the scent of cinnamon and something else, something bright and fresh, like the first morning of spring. Elsie stretched and yawned, feeling more rested than she had in weeks. She slipped off the window seat and padded over to the counter, where Mrs. Maple greeted her with a smile. "Good morning, sleepyhead," Mrs. Maple said, her eyes twinkling. "Or should I say, good midnight. Would you like to help me with a very special recipe?" Elsie nodded eagerly, her curiosity piqued. Mrs. Maple handed her a small blue jar. "This is the secret ingredient," she whispered. "It's called dream dust. Just a pinch can turn an ordinary pastry into something truly magical." Elsie peered into the jar. The dream dust sparkled like tiny stars, shifting colors as she moved it in the light. She sprinkled a little into the bowl, watching as the flour shimmered and danced. Together they mixed the dough, adding sugar, butter, and a splash of vanilla. Mrs. Maple showed Elsie how to knead the dough gently, folding in the dream dust with each turn. "You have to think happy thoughts as you knead," she explained. "Dream dust works best when it's mixed with a little hope and a lot of kindness." Elsie closed her eyes and thought of her favorite memories. Her mother's laughter, the way the garden smelled after rain, the feeling of a warm hug on a cold day. She felt the dough grow softer and lighter beneath her hands, as if it were rising with her thoughts. When the dough was ready, Mrs. Maple shaped it into small rolls and placed them on a tray. She brushed each one with honey and sprinkled them with a little more dream dust. "Now we wait," she said, sliding the tray into the oven. As the rolls baked, Mrs. Maple poured 2 cups of chamomile tea and set out a plate of lemon biscuits. Elsie nibbled on a biscuit, savoring the sweet, tangy flavor. The black cat jumped onto the counter, purring and rubbing against her arm. "His name is Midnight," Mrs. Maple said, scratching the cat behind the ears. "He's been my helper for many years. He always knows when someone needs a little extra comfort." Midnight blinked at Elsie, his golden eyes full of understanding. She stroked his soft fur, feeling a sense of calm settle over her. The oven timer chimed and Mrs. Maple pulled out the tray of dream dust rolls, the bakery filled with the most wonderful aroma, warm, sweet, and just a little bit magical. She handed Elsie the first roll, still steaming and golden. Elsie took a bite, and the taste was like nothing she had ever known. It was soft and sweet, with a hint of something bright and hopeful. She felt a gentle warmth spread through her, as if all her worries were melting away. Mrs. Maple watched her with a knowing smile. Dream dust helps you remember the good things, even when the world feels heavy. It's a reminder that there's always a little magic if you know where to look. Elsie finished her roll, feeling lighter and happier than she had in a long time. She looked around the bakery, noticing for the first time the little details that made it so special. The twinkling fairy lights strung along the shelves, the tiny potted plants on the windowsill, the hand-painted teacups hanging from hooks above the counter. She realized that the Midnight Bakery was more than just a place to buy bread and pastries. It was a place of comfort, of kindness, and of quiet magic. As the night wore on, Mrs. Maple showed Elsie how to shape dough into stars and moons, how to fill pastries with sweet jam, and how to dust everything with just the right amount of sugar. Midnight watched from his perch, occasionally batting at a stray bit of flour or chasing a ribbon of dough across the counter. Elsie lost track of time, caught up in the gentle rhythm of baking and the soft glow of the bakery. She felt as if she could stay there forever, safe and warm in the heart of the night. But eventually, Mrs. Maple glanced at the clock and smiled. "It's almost dawn, dear. The bakery will close soon, and you'll need your rest." Elsie nodded, feeling a wave of sleepiness wash over her. Mrs. Maple wrapped a warm roll in a napkin and tucked it into Elsie's pocket. "For sweet dreams," she said. Midnight walked Elsie to the door, his tail curling around her ankle. As she stepped outside, the first light of morning touched the rooftops, and the golden glow of the bakery faded into the soft gray of dawn. Elsie hurried home, her heart full of warmth and wonder. She slipped back into bed just as the sun began to rise, the taste of dream dust still lingering on her tongue. As she drifted into sleep, she dreamed of the Midnight Bakery, of golden light, warm bread, and the gentle magic that waited for her on Crescent Lane. The next day, Elsie awoke with the memory of the Midnight Bakery still fresh in her mind. She could almost taste the dream dust roll and feel the warmth of the bakery's golden light. All day, she wondered if it had been real or just a wonderful dream. But when she reached into her pocket and found the napkin-wrapped roll, still soft and sweet, she knew the magic was real. That evening, as the sky turned lavender and the first stars appeared, Elsie found herself gazing out her window at Crescent Lane. The bakery was dark and quiet, its windows shuttered and its sign barely visible in the fading light. She wondered when it would open again, and if Mrs. Maple and Midnight would remember her. Elsie's mother called her for dinner, and she spent the evening listening to her parents talk and watching the flicker of candlelight on the walls. But as the house grew quiet and the world outside slipped into sleep, Elsie felt the familiar restlessness return. She tiptoed to her window and peered out into the night. To her delight, the bakery's windows were glowing once more, golden and inviting. Without a second thought, Elsie wrapped herself in her blanket and slipped out the door, her heart beating with excitement. The bell above the bakery door chimed its soft musical note as she entered. The air was warm and sweet, filled with the scent of baking bread and something new, an aroma like roasted nuts and caramel. Mrs. Maple greeted her with a smile. "Welcome back, Elsie. I hoped we'd see you again tonight." Midnight, the cat, was curled up on the counter, but as soon as he saw Elsie, he stretched and leapt down, winding around her ankles in greeting. Elsie took her usual seat at the counter, and Mrs. Maple poured her a cup of warm cocoa. "We have a special visitor tonight," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Would you like to meet him?" Before Elsie could answer, the door at the back of the bakery creaked open, and a small, sleepy-looking boy shuffled in. He wore striped pajamas and clutched a faded blue blanket. His hair was tousled, and his eyes were heavy with sleep. "This is Theo," Mrs. Maple said gently. "He's having trouble sleeping tonight, just like you were." Theo blinked at Elsie, then offered a shy smile. "Hi." "Hi," Elsie replied, feeling a wave of understanding. She remembered how lonely she had felt before finding the bakery, and she was glad to have someone to share it with. Mrs. Maple set out a plate of caramel nut twists, their golden crusts glistening with sugar. "These are for sharing," she said, winking at the children. Elsie and Theo each took a twist, savoring the sweet, nutty flavor. As they ate, Mrs. Maple began to tell a story, a gentle tale about a squirrel who built a nest of cinnamon sticks and shared it with all his friends. Theo listened, his eyes growing heavier with each word. Elsie felt her own eyelids droop, the warmth of the bakery and the comfort of the story wrapping around her like a soft blanket. When the story ended, Mrs. Maple handed each of them a tiny star-shaped cookie. "For sweet dreams," she said, her voice as soft as a lullaby. Theo yawned and leaned against the counter, his blanket slipping to the floor. Midnight jumped onto his lap, purring contentedly. Elsie smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. Mrs. Maple led them to a cozy corner of the bakery, where two small beds waited, piled high with soft quilts and pillows. "You can rest here until you're ready to go home," she said. Elsie and Theo climbed into their beds, the scent of fresh bread and sugar filling the air. Midnight curled up between them, his purrs a gentle lullaby. As Elsie drifted into sleep, she heard Mrs. Maple humming quietly, her voice blending with the soft sounds of the bakery. She dreamed of caramel nut twists, star-shaped cookies, and the gentle magic that filled the midnight bakery. When she awoke, the bakery was quiet and empty. The golden light faded to the soft gray of dawn. Theo was gone, and Midnight was nowhere to be seen. Elsie slipped out the door and hurried home, her heart full of warmth and wonder. She knew that the Midnight Bakery would always be there when she needed it, a place of comfort and magic on Crescent Lane. The next few days passed quietly for Elsie. She went to school, played in the garden, and helped her mother bake bread in their own kitchen. but nothing compared to the gentle magic of the midnight bakery. Each night she peeked out her window, hoping to see the golden glow, and each time she did, her heart fluttered with excitement. One night, as a gentle rain tapped at her window, Elsie saw the familiar light shining from the bakery. She wrapped herself in her blanket and hurried down Crescent Lane, the raindrops cool on her cheeks and the air filled with the scent of wet earth and blooming moonflowers. Inside, the bakery was warm and bright, the windows fogged with steam and the shelves piled high with fresh pastries. Mrs. Maple greeted her with a hug, and Midnight the cat purred a welcome from his perch atop a basket of croissants. Tonight, the bakery felt even more magical than usual. On the counter sat a large, leather-bound book with a cover embossed in gold. It was open to a page filled with swirling handwriting and tiny, colorful drawings of cakes and cookies. Mrs. Maple noticed Elsie's curious gaze. "This is the recipe book of wishes," she explained. "It's filled with recipes for every kind of wish you can imagine. Wishes for courage, for friendship, for happiness, and even for a good night's sleep." Elsie's eyes widened. "Can anyone add a wish?" Mrs. Maple nodded. "Of course. Every visitor who comes to the Midnight Bakery is invited to add their own wish to the book. And sometimes, if the wish is just right, it becomes a new recipe." Elsie ran her fingers over the pages, marveling at the beautiful drawings and the tiny notes written in different hands. There were recipes for bravery biscuits, friendship fritters, and happiness honey cakes. Each one had a little story beside it, telling how the recipe had come to be. Mrs. Maple handed Elsie a pen with a silver tip. "Would you like to add your own wish?" Elsie thought for a moment, then wrote carefully, "I wish for everyone to feel safe and loved, even on the loneliest nights." As she finished, the words shimmered and glowed, and a new recipe appeared on the page. "Comfort crumpets, best served warm, with a hug and a cup of tea." Mrs. Maple smiled. "That's a beautiful wish, Elsie. Would you like to help me make the first batch?" Together they gathered the ingredients: flour, milk, a spoonful of honey, and a pinch of dream dust. Elsie stirred the batter while Mrs. Maple heated the griddle. Midnight watched with interest, his tail flicking as the crumpets began to bubble and rise. When the crumpets were golden and warm, Mrs. Maple spread them with butter and set them on a plate. She poured 2 cups of tea, and they sat together at the counter, savoring the soft, sweet crumpets and the gentle hush of the rain outside. As they ate, Mrs. Maple told Elsie about some of the other wishes in the book. There was a little boy who wished for courage before his first day at a new school. We made bravery biscuits together, and he said they helped him feel strong and brave. Elsie smiled, thinking of all the people who had found comfort in the bakery's gentle magic. She felt proud to have added her own wish to the book. After their snack, Mrs. Maple showed Elsie how to decorate the recipe book of wishes with tiny drawings and colorful borders. Elsie drew a picture of herself and Midnight sitting together by the oven, surrounded by stars and hearts. The rain continued to fall outside, but inside the bakery everything was warm and bright. Midnight curled up on Elsie's lap, purring contentedly as she finished her drawing. As the night grew late, Mrs. Maple wrapped a crumpet in a napkin and tucked it into Elsie's pocket. "For comfort, whenever you need it," she said. Elsie hugged Mrs. Maple and scratched Midnight behind the ears. She felt safe and loved, just as she had wished for everyone else. When she stepped outside, the rain had stopped, and the moon shone brightly over Crescent Lane. Elsie hurried home, her heart full of warmth and hope. That night, as she drifted into sleep, she dreamed of the recipe book of wishes, of pages filled with kindness, of magical recipes, and of a bakery where every wish could come true. A few nights after adding her wish to the recipe book, Elsie found herself wide awake again, listening to the gentle ticking of her clock and the distant hoot of an owl. She wondered if the midnight bakery would be open and if Mrs. Maple might have a new story or recipe to share. She tiptoed to her window and peered out. The golden glow was there, brighter than ever, spilling out onto Crescent Lane like a promise. Elsie wrapped herself in her blanket and hurried out into the night, her slippers barely making a sound on the cobblestones. As she approached the bakery, she noticed something unusual. A small group of children, all in pajamas and slippers, were shuffling quietly down the lane, their eyes half closed and their faces peaceful. They moved as if in a dream, drawn by the warm light and the scent of baking bread. Mrs. Maple stood at the door, greeting each child with a gentle smile and a soft word. Midnight, the cat wove between their feet, purring and nudging them inside. Elsie joined the line, feeling a sense of excitement and curiosity. Inside, the bakery was filled with a soft, silvery light, and the air was thick with the scent of vanilla and lavender. Mrs. Maple gathered the children around the big wooden table in the center of the bakery. "Tonight is a special night," she said, her voice as soothing as a lullaby. "It's the night of the sleepwalkers. Sometimes, when the moon is just right, children who need a little extra rest find their way here, even in their dreams." Elsie looked around at the other children. Some were yawning, others rubbing their eyes, but all seemed calm and content. Mrs. Maple handed out tiny pillows and soft blankets, and Midnight curled up in the center of the table, purring a gentle tune. "We're going to make sleepyhead scones," Mrs. Maple announced. "They're filled with lavender and honey, perfect for sweet dreams." She divided the children into pairs, and Elsie found herself working with a little girl named Poppy, who had curly hair and a sleepy smile. Together they measured flour, stirred in honey, and sprinkled dried lavender petals over the dough. The scent was calming, and Elsie felt her own eyelids grow heavy as she worked. Mrs. Maple moved among the children, offering gentle encouragement and telling a story about a family of hedgehogs who built a nest of lavender and slept through the longest winter. The children giggled and yawned, their hands moving slowly as they shaped the scones. When the scones were ready, Mrs. Maple slid them into the oven. The bakery filled with the most soothing aroma, and the children snuggled into their blankets, listening to the soft crackle of the fire and the gentle hum of Midnight's purr. Mrs. Maple served the scones warm, with a drizzle of honey and a cup of chamomile tea. Elsie took a bite, and the taste was like a lullaby, soft, sweet, and full of comfort. She felt her worries melt away, replaced by a deep, peaceful sleepiness. One by one, the children drifted off, their heads resting on their pillows, their dreams filled with gentle magic. Mrs. Maple tucked each one in, whispering a wish for sweet dreams and safe journeys home. Elsie felt herself growing drowsy, her thoughts drifting like clouds. She curled up beside Poppy, Midnight's purr vibrating softly against her side. As she slipped into sleep, Elsie dreamed of lavender fields, of moonlit nights, and of a bakery where every child found rest and comfort. When she awoke, the bakery was quiet and empty. The golden light faded to the soft gray of dawn. The other children were gone, and midnight was curled up on the counter, blinking sleepily at her. Elsie slipped out the door and hurried home, her heart full of peace and gratitude. She knew that the midnight bakery would always be there, a haven for sleepy dreamers on Crescent Lane. The next evening, Elsie's mother tucked her into bed with a gentle kiss and a promise of pancakes in the morning. But as the house grew quiet and the moon rose high, Elsie found herself thinking of the midnight bakery and the magical comfort it brought to all who visited. She slipped out of bed and tiptoed to her window. The bakery's golden light was shining, but tonight something else caught her eye. The garden next door, usually shadowy and still, was aglow with silvery light. The moonflowers, which only opened at night, were in full bloom, their petals shining like tiny lanterns. Curiosity tugged at Elsie's heart. She wrapped herself in her blanket and hurried down Crescent Lane, pausing at the bakery door. Mrs. Maple was waiting, her arms full of baskets. "Good evening, Elsie," she greeted. "Would you like to help me gather moonflowers for a special recipe?" Elsie nodded eagerly, and together they stepped into the garden. The air was cool and fragrant, filled with the sweet scent of the moonflowers. Midnight the cat padded silently beside them, his black fur gleaming in the moonlight. Mrs. Maple showed Elsie how to gently pluck the blossoms, careful not to disturb the bees sleeping in the petals. "Moonflowers are rare and precious," she explained. "Their petals hold a little bit of moonlight, perfect for making moonbeam muffins." Elsie filled her basket, marveling at the way the flowers glowed in her hands. She felt as if she were gathering pieces of the night sky itself. Back in the bakery, Mrs. Maple and Elsie set to work. They mixed flour, sugar, and a splash of milk, then folded in the moonflower petals, which shimmered as they touched the batter. Mrs. Maple added a spoonful of honey and a pinch of dream dust, and Elsie stirred the mixture, watching it swirl with silver and gold. As the muffins baked, the bakery filled with a soft, magical light. Midnight curled up on the windowsill, his eyes half closed as he watched the moonflowers outside. While they waited, Mrs. Maple poured 2 cups of warm milk and set out a plate of lemon biscuits. She told Elsie about the legend of the moonflowers. Long ago, a lonely star fell to earth and became the first moonflower. Every night its petals opened to catch the moon's light and share it with the world. Elsie listened, her heart full of wonder. She imagined the moonflowers glowing in gardens all over town, bringing a little magic to everyone who saw them. When the muffins were ready, Mrs. Maple handed Elsie the first one, still warm and sparkling with moonlight. The taste was delicate and sweet, with a hint of something mysterious, like a secret only the night could tell. As Elsie ate, she felt a gentle calm settle over her, as if the worries of the day were being washed away by the soft glow of the moon. She looked out the window at the garden, the moonflowers swaying in the breeze, and felt a deep sense of peace. Mrs. Maple wrapped a muffin in a napkin and tucked it into Elsie's pocket. "For when you need a little moonlight," she said with a smile. Elsie hugged Mrs. Maple and scratched Midnight behind the ears. She stepped outside, the cool night air brushing her cheeks, and paused to look at the moonflowers one last time. As she walked home, the world seemed softer and more magical. The moonflowers glowed along the path, lighting her way, and the bakery's golden light faded gently behind her. That night, as Elsie drifted into sleep, she dreamed of moonlit gardens, of muffins that sparkled with starlight, and of a bakery where every night brought a new adventure. A few days after her moonflower adventure, Elsie was helping her mother tidy up the house when she found something curious tucked behind a stack of old books. A small sealed envelope with her name written on it in swirling silver ink. She turned it over in her hands, heart fluttering with excitement. The handwriting looked just like the script in the recipe book of wishes. She opened the envelope and found a note inside. "Dear Elsie, there is a friend who needs your help tonight. Come to the bakery when the moon is high." With warmth, Mrs. Maple Elsie's mind raced with questions. Who needed her help? What could she do? She tucked the letter into her pocket and waited for nightfall, her thoughts full of wonder and anticipation. When the moon rose, bright and full, Elsie slipped out of bed and hurried down Crescent Lane. The bakery's windows glowed with their familiar golden light, and Mrs. Maple was waiting at the door, her face kind and welcoming. "Thank you for coming, Elsie," Mrs. Maple said softly. "Tonight, we have a special guest." Inside, the bakery was quieter than usual. Midnight, the cat sat on the counter, his tail curled neatly around his paws. At a small table near the window sat a boy about Elsie's age, his shoulders hunched and his eyes downcast. He wore a thick scarf and clutched a crumpled handkerchief in his hand. "This is Oliver," Mrs. Maple explained. "He's new to Crescent Lane and feeling a little lost." Elsie remembered how she had felt on her first visit to the bakery, lonely, restless, and in need of comfort. She smiled gently at Oliver and took a seat beside him. "Hi, I'm Elsie," she said. "Would you like to help me bake something?" Oliver looked up, his eyes uncertain but hopeful. He nodded, and Mrs. Maple led them to the work table. "We're going to make welcome waffles," Mrs. Maple announced. "They're best when made with new friends." She handed them each an apron and set out the ingredients: flour, eggs, milk, a splash of vanilla, and a jar of golden syrup. Elsie showed Oliver how to crack the eggs and whisk the batter, and soon they were laughing together as flour dusted their noses and syrup dripped onto the table. As the waffles cooked, the bakery filled with a warm, comforting aroma. Midnight jumped onto the counter, purring and watching with approval. Mrs. Maple set the table with plates, forks, and a pot of hot chocolate. She served the waffles warm, topped with syrup and a sprinkle of powdered sugar. Oliver took a bite, and a smile spread across his face. "These are the best waffles I've ever had," he said shyly. Elsie grinned. "They're even better with friends." As they ate, Mrs. Maple told a story about a flock of geese who welcomed a lost duckling into their family, showing him the way home. Oliver listened, his eyes growing brighter with each word. When the meal was finished, Mrs. Maple handed Oliver a small, heart-shaped cookie. "For courage and new beginnings," she said. Oliver slipped the cookie into his pocket and looked at Elsie. "Thank you for being my friend," he whispered. Elsie felt a warm glow in her chest. She realized that sometimes the best magic was simply being there for someone who needed you. Before she left, Mrs. Maple gave Elsie a new recipe card for the recipe book of wishes. Welcome waffles, best served with laughter and a kind heart. Elsie hugged Mrs. Maple and waved goodbye to Oliver, promising to see him again soon. As she walked home, the moon shone brightly overhead, and the bakery's golden light faded gently behind her. That night, as she drifted into sleep, Elsie dreamed of waffles, new friends, and the gentle magic that filled the midnight bakery on Crescent Lane. The days grew shorter and the air turned crisp, hinting at the coming of autumn. One evening, as Elsie walked home from school, she noticed paper lanterns strung across Crescent Lane, their colors glowing softly in the twilight. Each lantern was painted with stars, moons, and swirling patterns, and as the sun set, they lit up one by one, casting a magical glow over the street. That night, Elsie could hardly wait for the bakery's golden light to appear. When it did, she hurried down the lane, her heart fluttering with excitement. The bakery was even more enchanting than usual. Lanterns hung from the eaves and windows, and the scent of spiced bread and apples filled the air. Mrs. Maple greeted her at the door, her cheeks rosy and her eyes sparkling. "Welcome to the Night of 1,000 Lanterns, Elsie. It's a special celebration for everyone on Crescent Lane. Tonight, we bake treats to share with our neighbors and light lanterns to chase away the darkness." Inside, the bakery was bustling with activity. Oliver was there, along with Poppy and Theo, and even a few grown-ups from the neighborhood. Midnight, the cat wove between their feet, his fur shining in the lantern light. Mrs. Maple handed out aprons and recipe cards. "Tonight we'll make lantern loaves and starry apple tarts. Each treat is a wish for light and warmth as the nights grow longer." Elsie joined Oliver at the work table, and together they kneaded dough for the lantern loaves, shaping them into round, golden buns. They pressed tiny pieces of candied orange and lemon into the dough, making each loaf look like a glowing lantern. Poppy and Theo worked on the starry apple tarts, cutting apples into thin slices and arranging them in swirling patterns. Mrs. Maple sprinkled the tarts with cinnamon and sugar, and the children used tiny star-shaped cutters to decorate the crusts. As the treats baked, the bakery filled with laughter and the sound of stories. Mrs. Maple told them about the origins of the Lantern Festival. Long ago, when the nights grew cold and dark, people would light lanterns to remind themselves that warmth and hope could always be found even in the deepest winter. When the lantern loaves and starry apple tarts were ready, Mrs. Maple wrapped them in parchment and tied them with ribbons. "Now, let's share our treats with the neighbors," she said. Everyone bundled up and stepped outside, carrying baskets of warm bread and tarts. The lanterns swayed in the breeze, casting gentle patterns on the cobblestones. Elsie and her friends knocked on doors, offering treats and wishes for a cozy season ahead. Smiles and laughter followed them down the lane, and the whole street seemed to glow with kindness. When they returned to the bakery, Mrs. Maple had one last surprise. She handed each child a small lantern, painted with their favorite colors and shapes. "These are for you," she said. "Hang them in your window, and let their light remind you that you are never alone." Elsie hung her lantern by her bedroom window that night, watching its gentle glow dance across the walls. She felt safe and warm, knowing that the magic of the midnight bakery and the kindness of her friends would always be with her. As she drifted into sleep, Elsie dreamed of lanterns floating through the night sky, of laughter and warmth, and of a bakery where every night was filled with light and love. The lanterns from the festival still glowed in Elsie's window, casting gentle patterns on her walls each night. The bakery, too, seemed to shine even brighter, as if the warmth of the celebration lingered in its very walls. Elsie found herself thinking about the bakery's little mysteries, how Mrs. Maple always knew just what someone needed, how the recipes seemed to change with each visitor, and how the golden light never faded, no matter how late the hour. One chilly evening, as Elsie entered the bakery, she noticed something new. A silver spoon, polished to a mirror shine, resting on a velvet cushion in the center of the counter. Mrs. Maple was dusting flour from her hands, her eyes twinkling as she saw Elsie's curiosity. "That's a very special spoon," Mrs. Maple said, inviting Elsie closer. "It's been in the bakery for as long as I can remember. They say it holds the secret to the bakery's magic." Elsie leaned in, her breath fogging the polished surface. "What kind of secret?" Mrs. Maple smiled. "The silver spoon is used only for the most important recipes, those that are made with a wish, a promise, or a hope for someone else. It's said that if you stir a recipe with the silver spoon while thinking of someone you love, the magic will find its way to them, no matter how far away they are." Elsie's heart fluttered. She thought of her grandmother, who lived in a village far away and sometimes wrote letters about missing her family. "Could we make something for my grandma?" she asked softly. Mrs. Maple nodded. "Of course, dear. What does your grandmother love most?" Elsie remembered the stories her grandmother told about picking wild blackberries in the summer. "She loves blackberry jam tarts." Mrs. Maple's eyes sparkled. "Then blackberry jam tarts it shall be." Together they gathered the ingredients: flour, butter, sugar, and a jar of the darkest, juiciest blackberry jam. Mrs. Maple handed Elsie the silver spoon, its handle cool and smooth in her hand. "Close your eyes and think of your grandmother," Mrs. Maple instructed. "Remember her laughter, her hugs, and all the times she made you feel loved." Elsie did as she was told, her heart filling with memories. She stirred the dough with the silver spoon, feeling a gentle warmth spread through her fingers. Mrs. Maple rolled out the dough and helped Elsie cut it into circles, filling each one with a spoonful of jam. As the tarts baked, the bakery filled with the sweet, tangy scent of blackberries. Midnight the cat jumped onto the counter, purring and rubbing against Elsie's arm as if to add his own magic to the mix. When the tarts were ready, Mrs. Maple wrapped them in a box tied with a silver ribbon. "These will find their way to your grandmother," she promised. "The silver spoon's magic will see to that." Elsie hugged the box to her chest, feeling a sense of hope and connection. She knew her grandmother would feel the love and warmth baked into every bite. Before she left, Mrs. Maple handed Elsie a tiny silver charm shaped like a spoon. "For you, so you'll always remember that love can travel any distance." Elsie thanked Mrs. Maple in midnight, then hurried home, her heart full of joy. That night she placed the charm under her pillow and dreamed of blackberry fields, laughter, and the gentle magic that connected hearts across any distance. A week later, a letter arrived from her grandmother. Inside was a note. "Thank you for the delicious tarts, my darling Elsie. I could taste your love in every bite. I miss you, but I feel you close to me, even from far away." Elsie smiled, knowing the secret of the silver spoon was real, and that the magic of the midnight bakery would always find a way to bring people together. The first frost of the season dusted Crescent Lane in silver, and the moon hung low and bright in the sky. Elsie felt a gentle change in the air, as if the world was holding its breath. She knew deep in her heart that something was coming to an end, but also that something new was about to begin. That evening, as she gazed out her window, the bakery's golden light glowed warmer than ever. Elsie wrapped herself in her thickest blanket and hurried down the lane, her breath puffing in little clouds. The bakery door opened before she could even knock, and Mrs. Maple greeted her with a hug. "Come in, dear heart," Mrs. Maple said, her voice soft and full of love. "Tonight is a special night." Inside, the bakery was cozier than ever. The lanterns from the festival still hung in the windows, and the shelves were filled with every kind of bread and pastry Elsie could imagine. Midnight, the cat purred from his favorite spot by the oven, and the air was filled with the scent of cinnamon, apples, and something new, something that smelled like hope. Mrs. Maple led Elsie to the counter, where a single, unbaked loaf of bread waited in a bowl. "This is the last loaf of the season," she explained. "Every year on the night of the first frost, we bake a loaf to share with everyone who has visited the bakery. It's a way to say thank you and to send a wish for warmth and happiness through the winter." Elsie's heart swelled with emotion. She thought of all the nights she had spent in the bakery, the friends she had made, and the magic she had found. She helped Mrs. Maple knead the dough, adding a pinch of dream dust, a swirl of honey, and a handful of dried fruit and nuts. As they worked, Mrs. Maple told Elsie a secret. "The Midnight Bakery is always here for those who need it, but sometimes the magic chooses a new baker to help it grow. Someone with a kind heart, gentle hands, and a love for sharing comfort." Elsie looked up, her eyes wide. "Do you mean me?" Mrs. Maple smiled and nodded. "One day, when you're ready, the bakery's magic will call to you. Until then, you'll carry its warmth wherever you go." They shaped the loaf together, and Mrs. Maple handed Elsie the silver spoon for one last stir. "Make a wish, Elsie, for yourself, for your friends, for everyone who needs a little light in the dark." Elsie closed her eyes and wished for kindness, for laughter, for safe journeys and warm homes. She wished for the magic of the bakery to find anyone who needed it, wherever they might be. The loaf went into the oven, and the bakery filled with the most wonderful aroma, rich, sweet, and full of promise. While it baked, Mrs. Maple poured 2 mugs of spiced cider, and they sat together, sharing stories and dreams for the future. When the loaf was ready, Mrs. Maple sliced it and spread each piece with butter and honey. She and Elsie wrapped slices in napkins, and together they stepped outside into the frosty night. They left a slice on every doorstep along Crescent Lane, each one a gift of warmth and hope. The lanterns glowed softly, and the moon watched over them as they worked. When they returned to the bakery, Mrs. Maple hugged Elsie tightly. "Thank you for being part of our story, dear one. Remember, the door is always open for you, in dreams or in waking." Midnight brushed against Elsie's legs, purring his own farewell. Elsie felt a gentle peace settle over her, knowing she would never truly be far from the magic of the Midnight Bakery. As she walked home, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, and the world felt full of possibility. She slipped into bed, the last slice of bread tucked under her pillow, and drifted into the sweetest sleep she had ever known. In her dreams, the bakery's golden light glowed on, welcoming new visitors, baking new wishes, and sharing comfort with all who needed it. And somewhere in the heart of Crescent Lane, the midnight bakery waited, its windows shining, its doors always open, and its magic ready for the next dreamer to find.